Hello, everybody, and welcome back to CounterCast. I'm Scott Stantis, one of the cartoonists here at Counterpoint, where we do a weekly video podcast, and we talk to various cartoonists. This week's guest is Ted Rall. Now, if you don't know Ted Rall, well, then you shouldn't be watching this, because Ted is by far and away one of our most explosive provocateurs of this or any era. Ted is a best-selling author, New York Times best-selling author, Pulitzer finalist, columnist for of all places, the Wall Street Journal. We're going to have to talk about that. And and of course, a contributor to Counterpoint. Ted, thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you so much, Scott. Really appreciate it.
Now, full disclosure, Ted and I are really good friends. We talk several times a week. I respect Ted very much. He tolerates me. It's a great relationship. So I'm going to be a little tougher on Ted this, maybe I have been in the last couple of podcasts. So just buckle down, put on your seatbelts. It's going to be bumpy, or not. It's not. Ted can take it. Let's get some background real quick. Ted, you're originally from Ohio. Just give us some real quick bio background.
Yes, sure. So I grew up in south of Dayton, Ohio, in a suburb named Kettering. Went to college at Columbia University Engineering School for 3 years. They wisely expelled me in 1984 because no one would ever want to drive across a bridge that I designed, and most of all myself. And then in the late 80s, I worked in a series of sort of finance jobs, Bear Stearns as a trader trainee. I was a trust administrator and a loan officer at the Industrial Bank of Japan. Returned to college in 1990 to Columbia, graduated in 91. Got syndicated in 1991 and for Chronicle Features, which was the San Francisco Chronicles syndication arm. Was there for 5 years, then went to Universal Press Syndicate, which is today called Andrews McMeel Syndication, and I'm still there. I also started doing a syndicated column in the mid 90s, which is now at Creators Syndicate. And I also I've been a cartoonist for Mad Magazine, whowhatwhy.org, Sputnik News, of course, Counterpoint. So I've, like many of us cartoonists, I've jumped around to a lot of different.
Okay, but you kind of skipped the part. How did you become a cartoonist? Because it seems to me that your background, being an engineer major at Columbia, naturally dovetails into cartooning.
Well,
how does that happen?
Well, as you know, several of our peers have some esoteric, career paths, and I'm one of them. I wanted to be a cartoonist since I was 15 years old. Mike Peters at the Dayton Daily News was my local cartoonist, and he was very inspiring to me when I was growing up in the 1970s. Loved his stuff about Nixon, Ford, and Carter, and but I just didn't know how to get into it. Engineering was sort of like the safety thing that I did because I was a good math student. And I got a full scholarship to Columbia Engineering. So I was from a poor family. So that's kind of why I went in that direction. But I'm self-taught, as anybody who looks at my drawing can clearly tell. And I never went to art school. I've only taken a few art classes here and there. And but basically I would say self-taught, practice, still practicing really, and trying to get better on my own. It's not like there's the story of how I broke in might be a little more interesting, but that's sort of how I became a cartoonist.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. I mentioned that Ted is one of our top provocateurs, and I want to explore that. But I have to admit, Ted, this still makes me smile every time I think about it. Ted was hosting a show. What was it? Saturday and Sunday, or Saturday when you were at KTLA in Los Angeles, and they decided that his run was over. And your last show, if I'm not mistaken, you did part of it in French.
That is true.
Oui?
Oui. Yes. Just pourquoi pas.
I love that so much. Now, you, like I said, you've probably been by far and away the most provocative editorial cartoonist in the country. I think that's inarguable. Why? I mean, why take that path? I mean, and I guess the follow-up question to that is, are you a provocateur just to provoke? And if so, do you think that's constructive?
As I often do, I'll take your second question first. Definitely not. I'm not, we both know cartoonists who really get a kick out of making people angry and generating a lot of controversy in the press. And I'm really not one of those people. I mean, it's like, if anything, I'm scared of anger, and it's a little bit scary for me when people freak out because of something I did. But I do think, I think that's the job. I think cartooning is punk rock. It's meant to be provocative. It's meant to make you think. It's not like meant to be illustrative or explanatory, although certainly it can be those things. I think good cartooning is like a brick thrown through a window. It is dangerous. It is audacious. It asks questions that you shouldn't be asking. It is not woke. It is not politically correct. It is not nice. It is not kind. It is not considerate. It is not fair. It is mean, prickish.
Worst wedding vows ever.
Yeah. Now that might be like why I'm headed toward divorce. Yep. So it's definitely a, I grew up with punk rock. I'm 57. That's the music of my high school days. And I just thought, I really think a lot of political cartoons kind of miss a chance to do this. I also think there was more space to be audacious, maybe like 20, 30 years ago. And I sort of kept doing it. And I think also, in fairness to our colleagues, I've never worked on staff at a daily paper. So I've had a lot more freedom. Of course, obviously, I haven't had as much job security. I haven't had benefits. But, like when nobody's willing to pay you a salary, you can kind of do whatever the hell you want and have fun with it. So for me, like, I'm not going to say that if I had gotten a job offer at XYZ newspaper and they said, Ted, we'll hire you, we'll give you a great salary and full benefits and a retirement plan, if you tone it down, would I have said yes? Yes. And would I still say yes? Yes, I would. But since nobody's ever done that, I figure I might as well just have a good time.
But you say you're not a provocateur, but I'm talking to you. I'm talking to a guy who did the Terror Widows cartoon, which blew up and actually made us friends. It's a long story and we won't get into it here, but I screwed up, full disclosure, and defending you and should have been done better. The Tillman cartoon, you've written the Anti-American Manifesto. Now, how is this not provocation for provocation's sake?
Well, okay, so for example, the Terror Widows cartoon, it was a serious question, right? It was like after 9/11, I noticed that there were some people who were profiteering from their grief and their tragedy, like writing books, promoting partisan political agendas over like the deaths of their husbands or their wives. And I just thought this is a really interesting, very American phenomena. And I really want to do something about it. But the question is how, and it's like in a cartoon, you only have so much space. And I wanted to get into something about the commodification of grief. And I wanted it to be as, I wanted people to respond to it with as much disgust as I felt when I was watching this sort of thing. And so that's sort of my thinking behind it. Look, I thought it was an important issue. I thought it was interesting. And did I know that it might make people really angry? Sure. And I just didn't care, because why should I care? And I don't care. It's not like, it's not my business to care about such things. I mean, the question is the issue important? Is it interesting? Is it worth talking about? Hell yes. Could the cartoon have been executed better? Absolutely. Every cartoon of mine could have been executed better. But, it's like, do I stand by it? Sure. There's cartoons I wish I hadn't drawn. That's not one of them. Anti-American Manifesto. It's like,
yes,
it's hung firmly in cheek. I mean, I'm very pro-American. I love the United States. I get up every morning trying to think of ways to make it better. If I didn't love the country, wouldn't be my entire life's work. But the idea was kind of like, hey, let's take ownership of a right-wing trope where it's like, hey, if you criticize the government, you're anti-American. So I was like, okay, I'm going to own that. And I got to say, I think I kind of drove a stake through that word. You don't hear the phrase anti-American used a lot anymore.
But you also tried a fundraiser for a book about about having a successful revolution in the United States.
Mhm.
You know, I think that if I'm remembering correctly, the book begins with the revolutionaries in the Oval Office.
Right. Well, little did we know how likely that could be.
Yep.
My imagination is not quite as rich as I would like to think.
So, I mean, I guess what I'm asking again, I mean, I'm coming back to the original point, is that we all like to be, you know, have our cartoons make waves, right? We all want these to be provocative. We all want them to get people to think, and yeah, to get ticked off. Is there something wrong with us? I mean, seriously, as a group of cartoonists, every cartoonist wants that. That's kind of weird, isn't it? I mean,
well, I mean, I don't know.
What the hell's wrong with us, Ted?
Well, as you know, I know, Scott, you're a tremendous student of history, even more so than I am. And, I love it. And, as you know, Tocqueville said that what democracy was going to really require to succeed in the US and anywhere else was a very well-educated, highly informed electorate, right? That was like really crucial. Oops. So, but the point is that political cartooning and specifically editorial commentary in general is really an important part of that of the kind of cultural product that we need in order to create that kind of discussion. Because when you watch, like, cable news coverage, it tends to be very lockstep and very predictable. And sometimes you'll notice, whether you're on the left or on the right or centrist, you'll notice weird inconsistencies. And it's the job of the editorial cartoonist to point those out and look at the hypocrisies and say, hey, wait a minute, this, what they're saying doesn't really make sense. This is kind of absurd. Or to point at, for example, this week we're doing some cartoons about the UFO report. And it's like, there's something kind of crazy about the fact that the government is admitting that UFOs are a thing, and they're not ruling out extraterrestrial origin of this technology, and that somehow we're still talking about Prince Andrew and Meghan Markle. I mean, it's very strange, and like, it's fun, and to point that out. Who else is going to do that? I mean, no editorial page is going to do it. It's no, CNN isn't going to talk about it. And I think it's like, we don't teach people like what to think, but we encourage them to think. And that's, I think, important.
Well, and that leads to my next question, your politics. I mean, you are probably the most extreme cartoonist. There are some on the right as well, but I think on the left, you're probably, for an American cartoonist, how would you describe your politics?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. By American standards, I would be considered far left. In France, I would be center right. No, I don't know. Centrist, normal, average, typical, generic, kind of run of the mill. But yeah, I'm definitely a socialist. I'm an anti-capitalist, and I call capitalism into question all the time in my work. I grew up as a sort of McGovern Democrat, and certainly that's like close to my heart still. But as the Democratic Party has drifted to the right along with the Republican Party, I find myself to be a man without a party. And also, I'm not that interested as much in a lot of the woke concerns of political correct left. I'm much more interested in economic and social organizational issues, although obviously race and gender and these LGBT issues are obviously super important, but I do view them through sort of a Marxist class warfare lens.
And one of the things I love about your work, and I find very engaging is the fact that you are not lockstep with the Democratic Party, and you're certainly not lockstep with this administration. You're far to the left of them, and you've been castigating them mercilessly to your detriment. I mean, I read the comments on Facebook and on Twitters and all that stuff, and I mean, the Democrats don't know what to do with you.
They hate me. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ted. We love you though.
Well, thank you, Scott. And I agree. That's what's more important to me. Look, the thing is that it's very the two-party trap is really not a is really bad for the country. It's bad for democracy. A country with 330 million people cannot possibly get along with two major political parties, no matter how awesome they were. And they're not awesome. So there's a lot of corruption. And I think it's really the duty of everybody to sort of try to think of, like you and I have talked about this, Scott, many times one-on-one. I always think, our politics should be about what the country would be like if we were inventing it from the ground up. If we were at a new constitution tomorrow, would there be a Second Amendment? Probably not. Would there be an electoral college? Probably not. There's a lot of things we would do differently. So if those things are, legacy things, then maybe we should think about getting rid of them. So it's just, and I think, the two parties are like that. I mean, I criticize the Democratic Party from the left, but it's also not just sort of to be a gadfly. It's also to sort of, tell people, look, you deserve better. We deserve more choices. I mean, you should have as many choices to vote for president as you do of types of dishwashing liquid.
I couldn't agree more. And you and I have had this discussion a million times. I mean, you look at European, you look at virtually any other elections, democratic elections across the globe, and they have a dozen parties, maybe more. For me, I mean, it's, I was a never Trump to remain a never Trump Republican. So I couldn't vote for Donald Trump, clearly. My options were voting for the libertarians, which run a lot of ballots across the country. But like you said, I think this is my soapbox. We should have much easier ballot access for third parties, and stop calling them third parties.
Just parties.
Yes. Okay. So cartooning, you've been a cartoonist since, you said, 1991, professional cartoon?
Yes. So, well, I mean, I would say I've been a cartoonist since 1987. Because that's when I decided mentally, like, I am now going to draw 3 cartoons a week and try to get them published, and started picking up little papers. But 91 is when I got syndicated.
So, I mean, the arc of cartooning, I mean, we're in a real danger zone right now. I mean, tell our audience what the danger zone is as you perceive it, and how to fix it, if there's a fix to be made.
Well, as you know, Scott, obviously, political cartooning and the idea of basically words versus pictures that comment on current affairs go back thousands of years, literally, to and the thing is, so I think they'll be with us in some form. What is in danger is the professional political cartoonist, the person who spends most or a significant amount of their time just focused on the issues of the day, thinking about how to process them and turn them into a political cartoon. That economic model that supports that vanished with the demise of print media. And I point my finger, the blame to me really goes on what has replaced print media. And that's social media companies like Facebook that have, whose profit model has sort of leached off of print media and then destroyed them. And then also, websites that are news oriented, like Slate, Salon, and so on, Vox. Those websites are essentially just producing the same exact product as, say, nytimes.com or washingtonpost.com. They are media companies, but they don't hire cartoonists, and they only have, they only hire word people, they only hire writers. So there's no one hiring a professional cartoonist anymore. And so the professional is in danger. And you might say, well, who cares? But it's the difference between a professional photographer and a person with an iPhone, or it's the difference between a weekend pilot and a person who's in the Air Force or works for American Airlines. I mean, it's profession, or it's the difference between your Uber driver and a taxi driver who is licensed by the city and took a training course and has memorized the map of the town. There's a difference. They can each get you across town, but there's a difference. And if you if you let the professional political cartoon go away, the overall quality of the product will diminish to the point where no one's going to care about the format at all. And it's a unique format. It's really interesting. It does things that nothing else can do. And the fact that it's so freewheeling and wild and punk rock, you don't need a high school degree to do it. You don't need any licensing. You don't have to go to Columbia Journalism School. Anyone can do it. All you need is paper and a pen.
And a dream.
And maybe no dream. Maybe just paper and a pen.
Ted, well, thanks for sitting in with us this week on the CounterCast. Really appreciate it. Where else can we see you? Obviously, we see you on Counterpoint once a week. So that's kind of good.
I have a website, rawl.com and RALL.com. I have a number of books that you can buy through there. whowhatwhy.org, Sputnik News, you name it.
Oh, man. You're a Renaissance man. That's what you are. Ted, thanks a lot. Thanks again.
Bye.
And thank you all for listening to this week's edition of CounterCast. We'll be back again next week with another Counterpoint CounterCast. It's kind of hard to say, but I'm going to say it again, Counterpoint CounterCast. And our guest will be Lisa Benson. So stick around for that. Until next time, we'll see you in the funny papers.